Apple or Garmin? Has there ever been a more difficult decision that a runner has ever faced? Hi guys, welcome to my video. My name is Matt and this is What Matters to Matt. Now today I actually want to talk about a couple of different things. First of all, I want to give you an update on how my marathon training is going. And second of all, I want to try to answer for you the question, Garmin or Apple? Now I am going to share with you in future videos just a little bit more about my training program, but for today I want to talk about my run this morning. I ran a little bit over 8 kilometers at 5:24 per kilometer. I'll put the mileage up here on the screen, but it was a pretty good run. It was really cold. I actually probably got a little bit of a frost nip, not quite frostbite on my ear, but it was a little bit cold. But the run was great, felt pretty fresh. Conditions weren't perfect, lots of wind, lots of snow, lots of ice, but I was still able to get a pretty good pace in terms of where I'm at in my training. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that. Again, my GoPro kind of let me down. It got really, really cold, and GoPro doesn't like that, even the spare batteries that I had in my pocket. But to get to Garmin versus Apple, there are just a handful of things that if you're like me, if you're somebody who's been searching for that ultimate watch, that ultimate piece on your wrist that's going to help you get through your runs, track all your things, but you still want it to look good and still be at least a little bit smart, which one are you going to choose? First of all, when it comes to touchscreen is a really, really interesting thing because one of the things that Apple has going for it when it comes to touchscreen, and I have owned 3 different Apple Watches in the past, is that it's very, very intuitive. If you own an iPhone, absolutely, if you own actually any phone whatsoever, the touchscreen is very intuitive. You're just clicking on where you need to go. It runs very smoothly and it's very, very elegant. But where that truly breaks down is in a couple of different ways. First of all, if it's in the middle of the summer and I'm running or I'm working out, I'm doing exercise, if I'm using this, if my main reason for having the watch is using this for exercise, the sweaty fingers, the sweaty hands, it just doesn't work very well with the watch. And so the touchscreen causes problems that way. And more recently in winter, as I go through my winter training, I wear some pretty big mitts, some pretty big gloves on my fingers. And with the touchscreen, I just can't navigate the screen with those gloves. Now I know you can buy running gloves out there and different gloves that have little tabs on the fingers to help you navigate through phones and Apple Watches, that sort of thing. But the gloves that I wear, the gloves that I have to wear to keep my hands pretty warm, just don't work for that. But they do work with the Garmin 245, which is the watch that I have right now. They do work with using the tactile buttons for that. You're just clicking through. It's very simple, it's very easy, and it's not quite nearly as intuitive. Obviously, if you're just using buttons, if you're kind of stuck to that, you're not tapping specifically on what you want to get on your screen, but it's much more tactile and it's just easier to navigate in the cold or in the heat. Either one, it's just a little bit easier to navigate. And honestly, on the touchscreen, I'll give you a little bit of a story. The other day, actually, this was a couple of months ago, when I did make the switch over from Apple to Garmin for the probably last time, is I was doing one of my longer runs at the time, and I thought I was doing really well, and twice I looked down at my watch, and it was on pause. It had pause. Now, that could just be user error. I did look through all the settings. It didn't look like I had any kind of auto pause on, but I did lose a couple of miles in the process and it was really, really frustrating. And I think what probably happened was I tapped a pause somewhere when I was looking at my watch, flipping up my jacket, that sort of thing. And that's just not something that would happen with the Garmin. And honestly, that was the day that I got frustrated enough that I finally made the switch. The second thing is battery life. Holy Apple, does your battery life ever suck? Now, I know there are different watches out there from Garmin. Keep in mind, what I'm using is the 245 Music. There are some watches like the Venue 2 that have maybe similar life to the Apple Watch, and they lean a little bit more towards the smartwatch, Garmin's version of the Apple Watch. But the battery life on the Apple is very poor. I also know that yes, you can make different changes. You can adjust things on the watch, try to make it a little bit better. But ultimately what happens to me on a lot of my days now as I'm trying to train for a marathon, I do 2 workouts. I do a lot of 2 a day. So I wake up super early in the morning. I go for a morning run, I've got GPS on, I'm playing music, I go throughout my normal day. I'm kind of a heavy user, so I get lots of notifications to the watch. that sort of thing. And at the end of the day, I go for a second workout. And when I had the Apple Watch, what was happening oftentimes, I was a little bit worried that it wasn't going to stick to it, that I wasn't going to be able to finish my second workout and track it properly and make it to the end of the day, because the watch was giving me these notifications that it was 10% and it was close to dying. And that was just a little bit too stressful for me. And that ultimately was one of the other reasons, one of the other big frustrations I had with the Apple Watch. Next is the aesthetics. Now, don't get me wrong, I love the looks of the Apple Watch. It's very elegant, it looks great on the wrist, it's very fancy, and honestly, you can wear it in pretty well any situation. But ultimately, I like the looks of a traditional Garmin a little bit better. I like the sporty look, and I think these days, over recent years, with so many more people wearing fitness trackers and different things, you can wear that Garmin, whether it's out to a sport or on tuxedo night, doesn't really matter. You can dress it up, you can dress it down. It looks a little bit more normal these days to have some sort of a fitness watch or a tracker on your wrist. The second thing when it comes to aesthetics, and yes, this may just be me, but the Apple Watch, since it is such a piece of jewelry, really, when I had that, I was banging around, and I was banging around my watch as I always do, and I got a handful of scratches on it fairly quickly. Now, I know you can get screen protectors and cases. That's just not something I generally do. But the point is that the Apple Watch, when it got some scratches, it kind of broke my heart a little bit. It didn't look as good to me, but for some reason, with the Garmin, and it's not happening to me yet, but with the Garmin, I don't really care if I do get any scratches. It's almost like a badge of honor in some weird, strange way. If my Garmin starts to scratch up, if it gets a little bit beat up, that doesn't bother me at all. It actually makes the watch look better. I don't know how that works. I am a little bit protective, but not really. Haven't had any scratches yet. But for me, for whatever reason, if the Garmin gets beat up, it makes sense and looks right. If the Apple Watch gets beat up, it just frustrates the heck out of me because it's such a piece of art on your wrist. Before we get to the next reason why I ultimately chose Garmin over Apple, I really feel like this is a little bit of an Apple bashing, but it's not really. I have lots of Apple products and I love them, but I need to explain that I am coming at this from a runner's perspective. I am training for my first ever marathon, and after I put out all the options and looked at the different options available from Garmin, and there are a bunch. If you're on the fence between Apple and Garmin, make sure that you check out all of the Garmin options because there are so many of them out there. But for me, after I looked at all the different options, I landed on Garmin. I went back and forth so many times. But if you are liking this video, check out my channel. And if you check out some of my other content, you think there's going to be some value in that, or you're going to get some value in that, please consider hitting that subscribe button and hitting that bell notification. It always helps me out so much. Now let's get back to the video. And this next one, again, is one of the reasons why it kept having me go back to the Apple Watch from Garmin. And again, I've had several Garmins and several Apple Watches, was the user experience of the Apple Watch. Very elegant, and the apps are very robust group of apps that you can have on your Apple Watch, and they work seamlessly, more seamlessly than any other smartwatch out there. If you want the smartest watch with the most available features, Apple Watch is definitely it in my mind. But the problem was, and I heard this from another YouTuber a couple of years ago, and it kept being playing around in the back of my mind, was that any of those apps that I really loved on the Apple Watch, if I just reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, the same apps existed on my phone, and the user experience on my phone was that much better than it was on the watch because of the bigger screen and the inconvenience of pulling that phone out of my pocket. That couple extra seconds wasn't enough. So it still had me, even though I loved some of the apps on the watch, any of the apps that really drove me to the Apple Watch, they also existed on my phone, and I just preferred to use them on my phone. Now I recognize some of that stuff, tracking and everything else, tied to your watch, because your phone doesn't track things like your heart rate, but it still links back to your phone, and I still find myself looking on my phone anyway, tracking it through the Apple Watch. So ultimately, that wasn't a determining factor for me keeping the Apple Watch. I just didn't really see a point in having these very robust, all these really good apps, because I just wasn't using them nearly as much as I thought I would be, because ultimately I just use my phone. Alright, so that is the end of this video now. I know I was pretty harsh on the Apple Watch, and I am looking at this most specifically as somebody who's training for a marathon, somebody who's a runner, or somebody who does any sports. And I also know that Apple Watch has some of the best systems in the game in terms of tracking features, but things like wanting those tactile buttons, not being so worried about banging it up, battery life, all of that stuff is pretty important to me and ultimately had me make my decision to go with Garmin. So if you did like this video, if you want to see more of my videos, please consider hitting that subscribe button and hitting that bell notification, because it all helps this channel out so much. My name is Matt, and this is What Matters to Matt, and ultimately what matters to me most is my family, and I will see you in the next one.